Welcome into TWMP Daily. I'm Scott Faughn. We are joined by a full set today. We have Senator Jason Bean from the Boot Heel. Thank you so much for making the time.
Great to be here. I swam up here.
We have the Boot Hill's cultural soulmates, Jake Cross from Independence. Eastern Jackson County and the Boot Hill have a lot in common.
Yeah.
And then coming in remotely is the one, the only, David Barklage, the legendary dean of the Missouri Republican Party. David, thank you so much for making the time.
Well, when I heard that you had the Senator Bean on, I could not resist.
Let's start off with a bit of a serious part. I don't know how many times I've seen your video of the update retweeted. Give me the status on the ground of not the tornado recovery and now the flooding in southeast Missouri.
Well, and don't forget, I mean, we've had sandstorms. Like I said, we've had severe thunderstorms. We've had tornadoes. It's taken lives. It's taken homes and businesses, and now this historic flooding.
Do you have like a chosen group of people held captive in slavery or something, or what's up?
I'm telling you, somebody we've got to change our luck somehow because it's
the plagues
just keep on getting hit. But I just talked to my crew this morning, and the water is still not going down. But there's it's water everywhere. It's I've never seen it this bad.
So you've got is FEMA and SEMA on the ground for the tornado folks?
Yes.
So they're already there, I guess, for the. In a way, the flooding, you've already got a lot of, they're aware of the situation and focused on it already, right?
Right, and Governor Kehoe had already called a state of emergency for the tornadoes before the tornadoes hit, which was a great thing. So we were still able to operate under that emergency order.
So break down for me, yeah.
That's what I say is that I'm going to also make note that Jason is up in service of his state while his own farm, I understand, has been flooded and a lot of damage there, which is a testament to him. I got the benefit and actually the honor of working with his dad when his dad was the first Republican to win a seat in Dunklin County since statehood. And to that regard, I'm sure that Jason's father is very, very proud of him. The other thing I wanted to make a note of is our mutual friend, Robert Nodell, coming on board as the city manager of Poplar Bluff right before this happened. I think if it's not an act of God, it's very lucky for the community to have someone of his caliber there working with the people. So I'll be quiet.
No, I think Robert's connections have been very helpful. Yes. He knows not. It's one thing to know who to call. It's another thing to have the guy's cell phone number you need to call, and you can text him at 9 o'clock at night. And Robert Nodell has a phone full of those, and I think it's paid dividends for Poplar Bluff already.
Yeah, and David, thank you for the comments about my dad especially, but I can tell you that Robert, I mean, he came in and then had all this happen, and he and Robbie Myers both have been totally, Robbie Myers, Emergency Management Director for Butler County. I mean, they have been on it, and I mean, I bet combined they're not getting 4 hours of sleep at night. I mean, still.
So break it down. The flooding is there any projection now when the waters are going to recede?
Well, I mean, it's just a massive amount of water that's coming down. Where I'm at in the Boot Heel, I mean, like I say, it's all running toward us right now. So hopefully we'll start seeing some water start dropping, tonight or tomorrow. But it's just got to filter through. And the Ohio River was already full. Mississippi, luckily, was not. So like I say, it's just going to take some time.
I really, you see disasters and you see politicians fly, and it looks like a photo op because a lot of times it is. And I'm not sure how much it even means to the folks, but Mike Kehoe has spent a lot of time in that community in southeast Missouri, in your Senate district specifically. I thought and maybe it's because I know the people, right? This is very anecdotal, but I thought him showing up when he did meant something to people. Even if they just saw it on Facebook, I thought it actually meant something that he was down there immediately.
Well, I mean, you think about it. He called for a state of emergency before they occurred, and then those tornadoes hit that night anywhere. I mean, depending on if you're in Oregon County all the way over to Mississippi County, I mean, those things are occurring at 11 p.m. Up until 1:30 or 2 a.m. I called the governor at 6:30 a.m. First ring, answers the phone. What's going on? We talked it through. We knew there had been loss of lives. So many homes destroyed, business destroyed. Guess what he said? I'll see you here in a little bit.
Man.
Yeah, can I make another comment? Scott, I think we forget the unique geography of the Boot Hill. It's flat. It used to be a swamp, and it was made no longer a swamp by a series of ditches that have limited capacity. this is also the poorest region in the state. Again, the people aren't, work hard for what they have, but there's not a lot there a lot of times. And to that regard, you got some of the poorest people, some of the worst conditions from a standpoint of geography, yet they've come together. And I was glad you said something about Robbie Myers. He's a great talent. And Mike Kehoe, I mean, he's just personally engaged. He's not, he understands that the governor's office, as governor, he's occupying that office, but he hasn't forgotten who he is. And a lot of governors forget who they are. And I think he pulls up his sleeves and puts his boots on, just as he did when he was working on the ranch or selling cars, which is a testament to his leadership.
Well, and I'd just like to say Monday, I went in and talked to him. We talked about the resources that were needed. I mean, we needed the National Guard there. We needed Task Force One there on Monday. And guess what? They were there. And that, once again, just a great testament that he gets it. He really gets it, understands common sense, and understands people, the needs of the people, whether it's Southeast Missouri, Northeast, whether it's St. Louis, wherever. So very, very fortunate to have him as governor.
Independence has its struggles as well. I mean, you have meth lab explosions. That's pretty much it. But, I mean, that's still
Royals
not great. You have the Royals. Are people still Royals fans? I thought the Royals fans kind of stopped at the parking lot there at Kaufman.
It usually does. Yeah. Most of the time, the Independence people are too.
I mean, this is your prime time. Until Memorial Day, you're not mathematically eliminated, so this is the time to be a Royals fan, right?
Yeah. The early times when there's still some.
Look at me talk. David, let's turn the topic to St. Louis. I mean, we are Missouri Republicans, right? So we don't give a damn about anything but St. Louis. They have a big election today, even though the team is an absolute dumpster fire. This is not a city with a team. This is a team with a city. What is the new mayor or the current mayor going to do to end the damn seventh circle of hell we're in?
Well, one, if people could get to the game without being shot, it would make the experience a lot better.
Who wants to go? I'd rather be shot than go watch that shit.
You know what? Now, see, Scott, you're acting more like a St. Louisman. I have to differ with you on this. I was on Reardon's show, and everybody was whining. I remember the Cardinals, whether it was good or bad, whether Gibson was pitching, that I heard it in the garage as my dad and I were doing yard work, and it's a religion to those of us from at least Cape Girardeau. Maybe you didn't feel all the way down where you were. So
Jesus doesn't suck for 5 years.
No matter how shitty they are.
Okay, what about, since he's frozen, this is our time to shine. What about his endorsed mayoral candidate? Is she going to pull through? David, are you going to win tonight?
So here's the thing. I think that Kara is going to win. I think she has a huge challenge. I think I differ with Tashara. Tashara has attacked two developers who are probably some of the last people to actually care about the city and invest in it, and that's Paul McKee.
Okay, but I say you popped up on the ethics reports or something. Cut a check. I like Tashara too. I'm sure I have contributed to her campaign.
Well, she was attacking mega producers and Kara for taking Republican support, so I thought I would show her my support, and Tashara took it, which I was glad for. But in the end, I didn't like the fact that Tashara decided to make her campaign against Bob Clark and Paul McKee, two of the only people that care about the city.
Well, I think she was making a mistake there. I think nobody. That wasn't what I think the results showed in the first round. That was an unsuccess. I watched people attack Greg Singfield, and attack Greg Singfield or not, he's a big boy. Nobody gives a damn. People just don't care. They didn't. I don't think people cared about themselves and what mattered to them, not who somebody was fundraising from.
Yeah, and I think she took money from Rex Singfield, which again, because Rex cared about the city and invested in her, but to then turn around and attack others because they don't support her. I think the real unwritten story on tonight's election, or the postscript of it, is the resurgence of Jeff Rainford. Jeff Rainford, has been managing donors like Bob Clark and others to get them involved and engaged. I think he is going to be a force in not only city but regional politics moving forward.
The city will be better off. The more influential Jeff Rainford is, the better the city is and the better the state of Missouri is. The more people listen to one of the most, not just intelligent, one of the wisest people in this state, whatever your politics are, if Jeff Rainford's in the room when the decision's getting made, it'll be a better decision.
Well, and let me ask you this, Scott. You know, what I have found one of the greatest demises in St. Louis is that the community likes to embrace consultants from anywhere, staff with no experience, and then tends to relegate the more controversial people like Jeff Rainford, who has real experience, to the sidelines, and they get the same results: failure. Hopefully, they will actually start to realize that the Jeff Rainfords of the world, Lance Lacombs and Mary Ellen Ponders, people like that, actually know what they're doing, and they should be listening to them rather than some consultant writing a report from Cincinnati.
I take your word on that part. I just think that, look, I mean, Senator, you've spent how much of your session this year talking about? So it's about 99% of the time.
A lot of time.
You talk about the city. I mean, I actually think most of the senators wish they were Board of Aldermen members and not state senators. I think you did like two things for the rest of the state, and every single second has been spent on St. Louis. I do think, though, if you're talking about, I bought some stocks yesterday morning because it's the time to buy low. I mean, it's a fact of life. The fact is, St. Louis has been in a downturn probably since TWA merged, for sure since the brewery sold. It has been a downturn for the city of St. Louis. I do think if you could get some crime under control, get some leadership, maybe folks have confidence in, make it to where you weren't afraid to walk downtown at 7:30 at night in the summer. I think it's time to, smart people buy low, sell high. It's time to buy low on St. Louis, right?
Well, and David, you made a point about going to see a Cardinal game without getting shot. I hear that all the time from people in the boot heel. They want to go to St. Louis. They want to go see the Cardinals. They want to go see the Blues. But guess what their number one issue is? Is it safe? I mean, we hear all these reports, so I think you're hitting it on the head. By the way, David, quick question. You talked about going to the Cardinal game, seeing Bob Gibson. What year were you born, like 40, 45?
38?
Before the turn of the century, I think, someday.
However old he is, the frosted tips in that hair, they're not that old.
Oh, okay.
Not all of them's that old. But seriously, David.
Clean living, my friends. Clean living. You all wouldn't understand that.
Oh, that's a fair point. Especially my man over here, the kingfish of the lake. But no, I do think, Mike Kehoe, I would remind folks, and if Kelton has the map, the campaign you ran was wildly successful, winning every single media market in this state except for one, St. Louis. I'd like to remind the governor of that all the time if him or his staff is watching. Just remember, we all voted for you. The one group that didn't, well, it was David's people in St. Louis. But as we move forward, Mike Kehoe has said revitalizing St. Louis is important. And if you're going to, now I think we have the map up. David, can you look at the map here and tell us, what is that blue media market? Which one is that? I forget.
Yeah, that would be the St. Louis DNA.
Oh, they're the Eagle voters, right? Okay. So we should remember for the next 7.5 years, all the red folks were Kehoe voters, and that blue part was not, right? Just making sure I'm reading the map correctly. Is that correct?
Yeah, okay. But it reflects the fact that the region has been in trouble for some time. They make poor electoral choices, and they make poor governance choices.
I think, David, look, I'm just a simple hillbilly. You're a major St. Louis political influencer. I think it reflects the fact that the rest of the state voted for Kehoe and the St. Louis people voted for Eagle. I think that's what it actually reflects. There may be deeper meaning there, but the dumbass level I'm on, that's what the map reflects. But Mike Kehoe has decided, hey, I'm going to fix St. Louis crime. I got to tell you, David, I see no political upside in this. I see nothing but a pain in the ass, and that means that he must believe in it, because I can't for the life of me think of any other reason he took this on.
Well, that's the problem of working with Mike Kehoe politically, is he wants to say and do what he believes rather than what's politically expedient, which people like
this is proof of
love
that.
to be able to have a little latitude there, but you don't get it from him. His convictions are from the heart, and that's where you want a guy to govern, and he ran his campaign that way. But I also will say this, that, St. Louis is in dire need of help. It is a city that no longer governs itself in a region that is failing. I don't see them getting out of their own way. And at some point, advocates of local control have got to see the light, and that is that the federal Constitution created a confederation of states and a federal government relationship with states, and its cities are the creation of the state and nothing more. And so if the state needs to come in and protect the citizens, if the state needs to come in and fix the schools, if the state needs to come in and end a dominance of just poor governance, they have to step up and do it. These citizens need the state of Missouri to help them because they are not being helped. I mean, look at the schools, look at the economy, look at crime, look at trash, look at potholes. I mean, you can't find one metric in that.
Look at the Cardinals.
That meets the standard, except the Cardinals.
Well, let me just ask you, you talked to the governor probably as much or more than any other state senator, maybe anybody in the entire legislature. When you look at him, at Kehoe, deciding I want to take this history of this state is everybody kind of for the rest of the state ganging up on St. Louis for political purposes, for whatever. I don't see any upside to Mike Kehoe, the politician, for getting involved in this mess. Do you?
No, but I mean, and we talked about my dad a little bit. My dad taught me when the going get tough, the tough get going. And I think you're seeing Mike Kehoe say that. Say, no, we've got a problem in St. Louis. We've had that problem in St. Louis. And you know what? We're doing something about it.
I think you're right. I just, Jake, we watch politicians every day. Usually I can see the upside for them, like a tax cut. Whether it works or not, you can go and say, I cut taxes, look at me, I'm great. Mm-hmm. I see nothing but I mean, failure is more likely than success here. And I see no upside. Even if you succeed, no one in West Plains is going to think St. Louis is safe, right?
No, I think it really is an issue of appearances rather than statistics. I mean, obviously statistics are pretty bad there, but I think the way, and I think Kehoe framed it perfectly when asked, how is this going to be measured in success? And he said by the amount of business that moves back to St. Louis, which that has been a big issue that's been raised in the last couple weeks.
And the truth is, us Hicks don't like to admit it, Jason, but when you cut a ribbon on a project in the boot heel, chances are St. Louis is paying part of that freight. And if they got healthier, it does help our part of the state.
No, absolutely. I mean, I've said that what's good for the state can be good for the boot heel, just like what's good for Poplar Bluff can be good for Kennett. I mean, we can go down.
Kind of sometimes.
Look,
there's two things. So I want to strike back at that. The idea that because the corporate headquarters is located in St. Louis City or County, that it is doing us a favor. I mean, Enterprise cars, people in the boot hill rent Enterprise cars. People in every corner of the state rent Enterprise cars, yet a certain amount of income goes back to St. Louis County. And all of a sudden, we're doing you a favor by taxing and you being able to use some of that for schools in the boot hill. The fact is that I think if you look at the economy of St. Louis City alone, it is in dire straits. Everybody's moving out, vacant buildings, everything else. I think when you look at federal aid, look at the cost of doing business there, everything else, that St. Louis City is not generating. There's a trick what they're doing, Scott. Why don't you notice they no longer talk about St. Louis City's economic, portion of the state and how it's just so overwhelming. They talk about the region, and the region is St. Charles County and Warren County and Lincoln County and all these other counties in St. Louis County. No one even wants to talk about what the real statistics of the city, if it's a drain or advantage. And so I'm done with people thinking that St. Louis somehow is saving the rest of the state by donating to us. I don't think that's the case anymore. And I also think that it's a time that we are in a new era of government, that you're going to have to break down these institutions to the very bones because they have so lost their way, and it includes the cities. We are going to see the cities go bankrupt because they haven't been able to govern, and the Biden administration poured money in, propping them up, which actually hurt their behavior. And we're now going to see those things start to collapse all over the country.
Dave Barkus, we've got you here, the by far best strategist in the Missouri Republican Party. I wrote a column. I think if you're going to support Mike Kehoe, I think you're going to have to get on board with trumpeting the successes he can have in St. Louis. It's good for the state, but also if you're going to believe in Mike Kehoe, if you're going to believe in his judgment, you're going to support him. I think now that he owns the St. Louis Police Department, which I think by all common sense, this is his problem he has chosen to take, I think we all have to get on board. Explain to someone watching this who's a Missouri Republican that just thinks St. Louis is a ghetto hellhole with a terrible baseball team now, why it's important if you support Mike Kehoe to get on board with St. Louis.
Well, look, I opposed the takeover of the police department, but this governor chose to do it, and I support this governor. And I,
Kinda what
and I agree politically. I agree with you. It's a tough deal, but St. Louis wasn't doing it. They're not educating their kids, and they certainly were not putting criminals behind bars. Now, when Kim Gardner was taken out by Attorney General Bailey, with the help of Bill Corrigan and Ray Wagner and others, it helped a lot. And Tashara, has been claiming success when actually I think it's Gabe Gore's. But if you don't have all elements, you need the cops, you need the 911, you need the courts, you need the prosecutor to put, to make the system work. And St. Louis City has not been committed. The voters or the administration. And at some point, look, Scott, if you're from around here, I'll just tell you, I'm in Richmond Heights. I can't tell you how many times that our cars have been robbed. In Clayton, our office robbed. They don't just commit crimes in St. Louis City. People in St. Louis City come out to where the money is, where people are, and break in. And so it's not a St. Louis problem. It's a St. Louis regional problem.
I read that police report. I'm surprised you actually reported anal beads as being stolen out of your car. I wouldn't have. I just thought you just kept that quiet.
They were Audrey's. They were Audrey's.
It is true. I mean, I when I lived, I had a place in Central West End for a while, and if you call and report your car was broken into, they're like, so what? What do you want us to do about it? I mean, it is bizarre. I mean, if that happened in Cole County, 15 deputies would be at the crime scene, and it would be like the news of the day for a week. You all live a different life over there. I don't really understand it. But
nice is one, they weren't picking up the phone. People were actually calling for an ambulance and dying because no ambulance would show up. I think there were 78 times in 1 month that they failed to even show up. People quit calling. So one, they wouldn't answer the phone. Two, people quit calling. The crimes that were reported were only recorded as a statistic if someone went out and did a report on it. And if 8 burglaries occurred in a neighborhood, it was counted as one. If 2 people shoot each other, it's counted as self-defense. It's not even a murder. And the population has declined. St. Louis is the second highest decline in population.
So, but let me ask you this. I'm not here to dump on Tashara Jones. Look, I'm sure she did the best she could do for the situation.
No, I supported her. I gave her money. So
yeah, I'm talking to a bona fide supporter of her. But seriously, when a politician is going down, everybody dumps on him. I'm not here to do that. Kara Spencer is very likely going to be the mayor of St. Louis by the end of the night. If you were in a room with Kara Spencer, what's the top 2 or 3 things you would tell her to do right away to try to instill some confidence back in St. Louis city government?
Quit being a congressman and focus on the basics: trash, snow, potholes, safety. Every government has a role, and local government's role should be those very basic things. The state's role should be education and highways and basic things. It's when government expands into all these areas, as well-intentioned as it is we start getting in trouble because we only can do so much well. And to that regard, failing to focus on the basics is where everybody gets in trouble. So if Kara decides to do the boring work of seeing that potholes are filled, trash is picked up, kids can get to school without getting shot or to a Cardinals game, and actually trying to make the business community want to come back in St. Louis, create real opportunity, she will be a successful mayor.
That's interesting. Let's change focus here and talk about some of these races in Missouri. I think maybe the most interesting race is we're still talking about St. Louis again. Damn it. Let me gavel myself here.
Yeah.
The St. Charles County.
I want to gavel, but I want to break it.
The St. Louis and St. Charles County executives races, to me, are going to be the most interesting races you have. Yes. Bill Eigel, everything Bill does gets attention and sizzle. I don't know if you've ever worked for Bill, but I know you've worked against him in the governor's race, even though he did carry your home and none of ours. But I think you got Jason Law. Mike Elam is one of my favorite people in the world. If you don't like Mike Elam, it's you. Jason Law is an interesting guy, got a great story, great fundraiser. Can anybody beat Bill Eigel in St. Charles County?
Yeah, we recently did some polling there, and it actually showed that Steve Ellman was a 2-to-1 favorite over anybody.
Sure.
And so Steve Ellman has a 5-to-1 fave to unfave ratio.
Who doesn't like Steve Ellman?
I think What's that?
What kind of jackass would you have to be to not like Steve Edelman?
Well, I'm sure there's a few, but not many. It showed only about 14%. So, but look, I have a different view of Bill Eigel. I've been on the opposite side, but he has kept his word with me, and I think he has a lot to offer. He's got to find, that commitment to govern, because when you're a county exec, it's about governing. It's not about showboating or things. Being a legislature, it's about talking.
I think he'll be a
being
better
county
executive than he was legislator.
And to that regard, I think
Bean just said he'd
Jason-
almost have to be.
I think Elam, Law, and Bill all present different choices for the voters there, and I think a good election, spirited election, will let people make a voting decision.
Okay,
but I got to
but
tell you something, guys.
The silver
St.
tongue
Charles
David
is
Barkley.
important.
Can anybody beat Bill Eigel? You tell me. And are you
Well,
working for
as I
anybody
s-
trying to beat Bill Eigel?
Right now I work with Steve Eldman and some of the county execs in the region, but I'm not in a capacity of
Will
doing
Steve
elections.
Edelman
So
think twice about his decision and run again?
Yeah, I think he has to. I think that if it clearing out the primary, so it's him versus one other, I think he would consider that. But Steve has been a public servant for 40 plus years, and he deserves to be able to actually retire and enjoy life with his family and with his friends. But at the same time, he is a committed public service, and he's going to do what he thinks he has to do to make sure that St. Charles continues to grow and prosper in the region.
All right, give me a
Guys,
prediction.
think of
Does
this.
Steve Edelman reconsider? I mean, to me, Steve Edelman's an icon. Steve Edelman is in an age where sometimes it's hard to justify why you're a Republican. Steve Edelman is the quintessential statesman that makes you proud to be a member of the Missouri Republican Party. Does he reconsider and run again?
I think he reconsiders whether or not he runs again. It's going to probably be determined by other players. And I mean, if other candidates are not willing to mitigate the primary and come behind one person, I could see Steve Edelman in the race. Guys, let me just tell you one thing about St. Louis, one other thing about the region, and that is that look where people are moving. Most people from St. Charles came from St. Louis City or County. St. Louis City is losing black population every year at a significant rate. St. Charles is picking up black population, a lot of population from St. Louis City or County. To that extent, don't you think the mayor of St. Louis ought to be asking the county exec of St. Charles what they're doing and why people are moving there versus leaving St. Louis? Intuitively, guys like us from the Boot Hill would believe that would make sense. But it doesn't seem the mayor of St. Louis, the past mayor, and hopefully whoever the next mayor is, might actually ask that question and start asking, why are people moving? What are you doing right? What are we doing wrong?
Do you know
That
Kara
would
Spencer
move
personally? I mean, I know her enough. We when I see her, we talk. She spent some time in Jeff City working on utility issues for a while. I've always liked her. I always thought she was a very nice person, smart person. I don't know what she's like in this capacity. Do you know her well enough to project what kind of mayor she'll be? Will she make those phone calls?
I don't. In fact, I'm almost to a point where I'm not for anybody for mayor. I'm against who's there until whoever's there actually does the right thing. And in fact, I would almost argue to the business community, quit supporting mayors.
Are you saying
and just
Rainford should
hold-
run for mayor in 4 years? Because I would actually waddle my fat ass over and knock doors, probably in St. Louis Hills, but still for him.
I would too.
St. Louis County, Sam Page. I've always felt he's benefited from a weak field, but he's won, right? The scoreboard says Sam Page wins these elections. I kind of felt like he hasn't had the strongest contenders. Does he get a strong contender this time, and what happens in St. Louis County?
I think we see a change. I think that that there is a change happening in the Democrat Party, which will benefit them long term. That you're seeing them walk away from the Cori Bushes, Tashara Joneses, Sam Pages, and look for people that
Are you
more
saying the age of
centrist.
black girl magic is over?
Well, I think so. I mean, and look, the party basically said no to black men and only to black women, and they're coming to grips with what that has done to their party, to Hispanics and other minority groups as well. as them, pushing black men out of the party. To that regard, I think, Brian Williams looks good. I think there's potentially someone else from the business community. We'd love to see a Chris Koster get in. Someone like that who could have governed the state well, would govern the region or the well.
I remember one time he tried to talk Eric Schmidt into that race. Long time, 10 years ago now. Gosh, we're getting old. You think Chris Koster really sets aside that job he has to do county executive?
I think in his heart of hearts he would, because at his core, you know how much he loved the game and loved policy and loved doing things.
And was so good at it. So good at it.
He shouldn't, financially, he shouldn't, probably for his family, but for the community, it would make sense. And if not him, someone like him, because imagine the synergy between a Chris Koster
I think
and a
there's
Mike
him,
Key.
and then there's anybody else is way down here. All right? I mean, you're talking to two Koster donors here, as everyone would like to tell you. I mean, there's Chris Koster's in a stratosphere of Chris Koster, and then you're a guy that's never ran before that could sell finances down here. Significantly, I mean, if Chris Koster would run, I mean, Sam might drop out, right?
Look, I think tough times, dangerous times, breed, real leadership. And I think you have to sometimes hit a low to take people like Chris Koster and engage them, because Chris...
Have you heard of that? Yeah, have you heard Chris Koster's considering this?
This
is
is
the first. Yeah, this is why I like talking to Barklage.
I love it.
Well, I'm outing him. I don't know if he's considering or not, but I certainly like putting on the record.
I believe this type of thing he would do.
Sure that people call him and say someone was saying that.
Okay, I'm going to text him right now on the air here and tell him what you're doing. What about Brian Williams, Jason? You serve with Brian. I think Brian is the most talented politician in the Missouri Democratic Party. I actually think, I mean, obviously I'd not heard the name Chris Koster, but the name I heard, if you want to talk about injecting some life and some energy and some working together and calmness, maturity, I mean, that just seems like Brian, right?
Yeah, I mean, he does an amazing job. Like you said, he's a good leader for the Democratic Party, does a good job, seems to have a good head on his shoulders, and he seems to be involved in a lot of different things and does it in a really, really good way. I've worked well with Brian, and I think he could be definitely a very viable candidate there.
Well, I mean, he's going to be a viable candidate. I was just texting Chris that you're outing him and announcing his candidacy. I'm going to say he says you're announcing at 4th of July. Now, let's just see if Chris, while he's busy being a captain of industry, has time
I'm
to
get a big limo pulling up here and him running out red. And with his orange hair, his red hair, it's scary. I'm going to have to run for cover.
All right, let's talk about some of these state Senate races. There's rumors of a primary down in Joplin, as Ron Richard would say, Jobland. Senator Jill Carter knocked off an incumbent. There's talk that a sitting representative, Ben Baker, might give her a run. What happens down there?
We've seen, a couple of switches. She beat an incumbent. So it's right. Joplin is one of those communities that you've got two different Republican establishments, sort of like Kansas. But I think Jill will be hard to beat. I think that
Yes,
she's got the work ethic. She's committed. The characteristics you look for in a candidate, I think she has. So I think that one
David,
would be a very tough race.
You said something to me when we were doing this. We were talking about the debate between Harris and Trump. And you said at the time on the live stream that you didn't think Trump should debate her again because it's very hard to attack a woman and savage a woman like that. Hillary Clinton's her own, just the most unlikable person ever. Trump struggled with how to attack Kamala Harris. You said I wouldn't debate, and Trump ultimately didn't. I do think, especially, and I think it's even more in a small town. I don't know who this is.
You didn't take my phone call yesterday, by the way.
Well, I thought that might be Chris or something. When you're rich, you have burner phones. So I guess to me, I think it'd be very hard to attack her. Much harder a woman like her than even Bill White, a man.
Yeah, look, and again, I think look at her personality. I think I don't know her, personally, but from people who work with her, Jason, you, and others, have always described her as genuine, as if not a kind soul, but professional. So I think it's just narrows how you beat someone like that as an incumbent who is generally voting correct. So to that regard, I think that that's going to be a toss up at best. But
All
I
right.
lean towards her.
And I mean,
Wait.
like you said, she's a hard worker. She's very genuine. You said it too. But, she really is passionate about her district. I mean, she works hard. And I've seen that in several ag issues as being ag chairs come to me. Very, very passionate. And like I said, I think that's just hard to beat because, when you have all those attributes, it's just hard one to beat.
I think that what a very formidable candidate. It'll be a big race if he makes the race. He's a very serious politician, and very well known in that community. And maybe because of some circumstances, he could poll strong enough on his own. I just think a woman in a race like that's very hard to go after and attack, especially an incumbent. I just think it'd be an interesting challenge on the other side of her to navigate those waters. Let's talk about open seat in the 30th. Melanie Stennett, Brian Gellner. I think former House Minority Leader Crystal Quaid's out. That kind of leaves the world starts looking at Betsy Fogle. What happens in Springfield?
Look, I like Gellner. I ran against Gellner with Curtis Trent last election cycle, but I thought that district was wrong for Gellner. I think he fits Springfield well, and I like the synergy. Springfield has always been underrepresented, and you haven't really had a synergy between the two senators from there.
It was.
And I think that having a Gellner and Curtis Trent combination will create a synergy that is unlike anything before. And look, Lincoln over budget could do a lot, and now with Curtis in there, that's helpful.
Nobody can
Lincoln,
see the political landscape quite with the breadth and the array that Eric Burleson could. Lincoln will get that. So you think Gellner over? So I'm with you, but in a general, is it so? I have sat here for 10 years and had people tell me, like serious people, the Democrats are going to have a good year. I have not seen the Democrats have a good year since 2008. Does it take a good Democrat year for them to win that seat?
Yeah, I mean, we've been fighting together for a long time and building an infrastructure to be able to support Republicans, and it's getting harder because it's becoming more urban. But
It's also getting harder because the Republicans act like assholes sometimes down there.
Well, yeah, but I think Gellner gets the community. I think the institutions support him. I think he's able to raise the money you're going to need to be competitive there.
He's going to have to kick in some money in the primary, right? I mean, he's a more serious contender if he makes a donation to his own, right?
And I'm sure he's capable of it, and he'll make that consideration. Look, Melanie Stennett, is very capable too. I think either one.
Is she not a better matchup against Betsy Fogle?
I think in 20 years ago, yes, but today I think people are looking for someone who resonates and has competence and who they think will get more done. And to that regard, I think he can make that sell point. It's not a woman versus a woman. Again, if Betsy was the incumbent, I would say that would be more problematic. But Betsy isn't defined, and you can define her before she ever gets a chance.
Well, she's defined as a Fogle, which is a good way to be defined in Springfield.
I agree.
Let's move up to where we're sitting right now, Cole County. You've got a race. Former Rep. Lisa Thomas talked about running. I don't know how serious. I don't know her that well personally. Rudy Veet, the legend of Wardsville, very beloved person in the county, running, trial attorney, very wealthy, could as much as Gellner could write a check for, Rudy could match him, I think, and still make his mortgage. Derek Spicer, great guy, city councilman here in town. But I feel like it's 53-47 now, Cole and Montauk versus the Lake. Ike Skelton, presiding commissioner from Camden County, I don't think the government should be taking pictures of your license plates. I don't know why they need that. They need to mind their own business. Worry about fish. Don't worry about license plates. But he went and took the thing down. Now, you're down there more than I am.
In front of two state troopers. So
yeah. I mean, that was dumb. And so my question is, David, if this dude gets out of this, I think Ike Skelton's going to be a political force. If he doesn't, well, he's probably done, right?
Yeah, but I don't think the winner is in this race yet. I believe it's still early, and I
Let me
think
take a big
that
drink
you'll
of my
see
Coca-Cola.
consolidation. You'll see a consolidation. Very good, very intuitive. And to that regard, I think that we'll wait and see. But I agree. You've got
How
to
you gonna
watch
talk
the
Marie into
dynamic.
this? That's what I want to know.
race.
Only David Barclay's silver tongue could talk Marie into this.
Look, I like Derek. I like Rudy. I don't know Lisa and Ike Skelton. I drove his dad when his dad. I've met his dad a couple times in Congress, but my point
That's his
is, I just
dad?
don't think.
That's actually his dad?
Yes.
No kidding.
Mm-hmm.
I
You,
didn't know.
you didn't you didn't put Ike Skelton and Ike Skelton together there? Is that
I did. I just
Bill
actually
Emerson.
I didn't put this Ike Skelton with
Bill
that Ike
Emerson.
Skelton.
Bill Emerson and Ike would drive to work at times.
Sure.
And Bill was
What a
very
legend
good friends
this
with
thing.
Ike.
Shout out to
That's
Scott
how
Charton, who literally wrote the book on Ike Skelton.
Yep.
Oh,
Literally.
isn't Scott Charton just eat up with his mayor's race? It's so funny. He'll send
That
me
he
stuff
is.
that happens, and I'm always like, Columbia people are weird. Columbia people suck.
Republic
Is
of
that
Columbia.
dude gonna win? The Murph guy?
You've got Scott, you've got John Ratliff, and you know how Ratliff gets obsessed on
Oh, yeah.
campaigns. This has been his focus, and
And he's pulled off some wins up in Boone County he shouldn't have won.
I wouldn't put that. I wouldn't. I think if anybody can do it, he can.
I think Columbia is still going to be a bizarre place regardless. But I know how much Charton is in this, and I'm really, if I could vote in the race, I'd write in Scott Charton's guy, whoever that happens to be. So you think in the sixth we're going to see some new stuff? What about the eighth? And Searpoy's leaving. That is a race that the only other race in the state that's got a primary and a general. Dan Stacey's in. I have to think a different type of Republican will also jump in.
Well, I would. You've got John Patterson, Speaker of the House, is
It would be
very
great.
viable
I think
if he's.
if Patterson announces the race is over, right? This is no longer that competitive.
Yep. And there are some business people that are looking at it that are very substantial and very capable and very talented. Again, it's a little early. A lot of things change this early.
Connie Searpoy still has 2 terms. She could run. I'm just pretty much Chris Costering that same way. I go back. But I do think Carrie Ingle's a legitimate contender. If you see the stock market continue, if Trump is, if the Trump run starts to fade, I think Carrie Ingle will be there to take advantage of if it's a good Democrat year.
Well,
she's a serious contender.
Yes, but you have personal considerations that she has have to weigh, and we look at that with every candidate. Every candidate has professional, personal, all those different things that have to come together at the same time. So I don't think the Democrat is necessarily chosen in that district either.
Look at David, all stern dissension. No. Carrie's going to be the Democrat. She's going to be good. I think Patterson is the sincere favorite. I also think, Senator, if you've really done something really bad in life and God wants to punish you, he'll put Dan Stacey in that Senate with you.
probably?
Look at that poker face. It comes from the deep boot heel. What about Tony Luchtemeyer's race in Platt and Buchanan?
Well, I've known Charlie Shields since in college.
What a great man. He's on that level with Ellman as like tip top of human beings that served this party.
Brenda is top and independent.
Mm-hmm.
Where the Herzog Rowe logger machine goes will be critical in that race.
We're talking Nathan Willett, right?
Yeah, you got Nathan Willett. Well, I don't know if he's part of that machine. He's definitely, activist. He was out there working independently for Kehoe and helped deliver the state for Kehoe.
And worked it for Kehoe. I mean, he put time in.
Oh, very much so. Yes.
Nathan Willett, as a Kansas City councilman, he put hours in. I mean, Nathan really, lots of people helped. You don't have a victory like Kehoe had, and everywhere as we saw the map earlier, everywhere but St. Louis. You don't have that type of success without people working. Nathan Willett, I mean, he put the hours in, man.
He did, and he organized an effort to knock on doors, to get signs up, everything else. When
he has the key Robin Winokur endorsement.
Yep.
So who do you think? Is it going to be Brenda or Nathan?
I think that in Brenda's view and Charlie's view, they don't need more accolades or more offices. I think they're going to look at the win, and if it's an opportunity and the right people support him, she'll weigh in. And if it's not in the cards, her and Charlie will spend their time doing other great things for the community.
Do you think there's a scenario where both Brenda and Nathan run, or will this be handled in the back room?
You know, I think that it's early enough that major supporters in that race will make it clear where they are, and I think the players want to sort of get an acclamation or a direction on it, because I actually think there's enough synergy coming from a few places that will help shape that race around a person that will be in the lead and probably continue in the lead.
What about the Great Northeast? I've met Sarah Graff, very impressive. Greg Sharp is a great guy. I think Louis Riggs, who's more than one intellectual folks in the legislature, has stepped aside. What happens in the Great Northeast?
Again, I would caution very early that district and its demographics determine a lot of who wins an election, and I'm not seeing the demographics necessarily favor anybody quite yet. And to that regard, you could have a John Cawthorn, you could have a Brian Munslinger type ag person come from there that has regional scope. Look at Jason Bean. Jason was not from Poplar Bluff, which was the clear population Republican center, but the Bean family, the Bean name, Jason Bean, the gentleman of the Boot Hill, was able to consolidate, New Madrid, Mississippi, Pemiscot, Dunklin, and have severe reach into Stoddard, giving him a different kind of base. So you've got to look for a regional.
It's interesting. You waited to announce till what I think most of us consider. I mean, you were discussing you were going places. Right. What was your strategy, how you played that out, and waiting to formally announce till filing was already open, right?
Well, I mean, I want to see, who all came into the race. I mean, we knew definitely some to see if anybody else, but look at the, the area that where the people came from. I mean, I had 3 people that announced pretty much they were running in one area. And, going back to, even though, I mean, David, your comment about, some of the big donors had already, if they choose who they want to run, well, I got in a race where some powers that be had already chosen their candidate and was still able to garner 46% of the vote. So who knows on that?
You know how I knew you were running?
Yeah.
Barklage hadn't really signed with anybody else, and so I knew you were. To me, that was a dead giveaway that you were totally running.
But I also watched people say they were running early and were passing out information they were running, like the November before, which I said, okay, well, they're making that point. They're going too early.
Who's going to remember any of that?
Exactly. Well, in fact, I saw people say, "I will remember him," and throw stuff away.
So I think Sarah Graff today, the person that worked for Graves, worked for Roy Blunt. Jake, we met her. She's impressive.
Yeah. No, I think the Axiom pick in this race is definitely something to keep an eye on.
I think that's an advantage in that part of the state. I agree.
Yeah.
Just like, there's parts of the state David has a handle on. There's parts, everybody's kind of got a place where they have a long record of success. Because usually, if you're the consultant on a race that wins, you want to go find that consultant. The best candidates that they get to pick. I think that's a little bit the case, but I think she's impressive in her own right. I mean, you putting Graves and Blunt on your resume, making the trips. I think, now I can't say this for sure, I think she'll have the support of Cinder O'Laughlin, and when Cindy's in on something, she's in.
Yeah.
I think the race starts with her. Am I wrong, David? I mean, she's the front runner until somebody else comes out that can put together a better campaign.
You look at major donors, you look at activists, you look at, like I said, that regionalism. If you've got someone that's got a regional name like Jason and his family has. And so all those are factors, and having the support of Graves and the Axiom organization up there, and the incumbent senator are all good things. But I got to tell you, it's very hard for senators to pick their replacement. It tends to get some backlash, and that district is different parts demographically. So my point just is, she may be the candidate, she may win, but if someone's going to come in and be an interloper in the race, it would be someone probably from the ag who has a regional footprint up there. They would be a contender.
All right.
Otherwise, I'd not.
Jake, am I missing a race, or can we talk Jeffco?
I think Jeffco. I think that is probably the big one that has recently come up now.
So Senator Coleman sat in this chair 2 weeks ago, I think 2 weeks ago today, and said she was not going to run for re-election. Opened it up. There's Kenny Waller and Renee Reuter have discussed running. I think Renee maybe even announced, but
Yeah.
they've kicked around running. Then Jim Avery, former representative from St. Louis County, has told me he's going to run. We'll see. I don't think he's formally announced. And then David Castile, businessman, representative from Jeffco. It's a pretty strong field, right?
Very.
You picked a horse yet?
So I like David Castile in that race.
Hell of a guy.
I think that he is solid. His background is a great Jefferson County story.
He's a hustler.
About where he came from and what he's done. And so I like the dynamics of him. I wish that Mary Elizabeth would have stayed in because I think that she is a rare talent and a beautiful soul. And to that regard, she'll be missed. But I like Kester. I think Jim, I've known Jim from when he was back in the House, being a trial attorney from St. Louis and then translating that to Jeff County. Jeff County is a little less suburban than St. Charles, a little more, it has a little stronger community.
Well, you have Arnold, which is St. Louis, and then you have like Herky Down, which is like real people.
Yes, but even Arnold, has been long enough distinct and grown to where it's got its own identity. And again, I just think Jim is going to challenge that.
You really think Arnold has an identity, really?
Well, they do right now. The Scott Fitzpatrick is giving them a very good identity of exposing their fraud and corruption over their taxing district.
Well, I mean, they do elect bankrupt Uber drivers to office, so.
Well, I get that. I think that Renee.
I'm gabbling you for gabbling me on that. That's just a fact.
Renee's got a decent following. I like Ken Waller. I've always liked Ken.
Yeah,
Ken's got opportunity. He can run for county exec. The county exec race is the other big dynamic here, Scott, because I don't think that's necessarily determined, and so Ken could go there.
Don't you think Marshak's guy's going to win?
So Marshak, if he were running, would win in a heartbeat.
Yes, he would.
But
I don't think he wants the demotion.
Guy, it's when you're someone guy like Marshak, you're sort of in his shadow, and so I don't know if that's that good or bad. If it were him, absolutely. But I mean, my God, you compare him to Marshak, and again, I don't know this gentleman. I just know that Dave is, such a strong independent leader himself. If he were running, no question. I think it's wide open that the county exec could pick out of that Senate race, and it could come down, and change differently. Everybody had to rush in to put their stake on it. That doesn't mean everybody's going to stay in.
I think Marshak's guy's the front runner, but the fact you're Marshak's guy, you've never ran yourself. I mean, he's got some stuff to prove, but if I was starting with an endorsement in Jeffco right now, I'd want to start with Marshak. Where's Derek Good on all this? Where's he at on the Senate race? Derek's a good barometer.
Derek is going to be where Derek wants to be. I'll let him speak that sometime.
All right, we got to have Derek on because wherever Derek has Derek knows where every single body and bone is buried in Jeffco. He'll know everybody, who their kinfolks are, who they're related to, what they did 15 years ago with the Eagles Club that was embarrassing. He'll know. Derek will have a great. We'll have to get Derek on. Those are two interesting races. All right, so you're going with Castile?
I wouldn't out Derek on this, and I'll tell you why. Because Derek is also one of those guys in the county who's going to be trying to mitigate some of these races to get the best outcome for the county. And to that regard, I like him in there being a broker and trying to help get the right person in the right race. And yes,
what a great guy.
I think David's the front runner. I think Jim has the capacity to run a competitive campaign.
I think Avery will be a rocket. Either he'll shoot off and be a top contender, or that rocket will crash, and it won't quite work. I think Jim's personality is actually pretty good for Jeffco. His backstory, outside of he's a veteran, that's good, but being a trial lawyer, being from St. Louis, those might be obstacles. Jim's personality is fun. When I'm around Jim Avery, I'm having a good time. And I think that Jeffco folks, I think Jim's personality might do well in Jeffco.
Well, we all have a good time when we're around Scott Faughn. That's just a given. It may be you, Scott.
I am curious. How would the race look like if Ken Waller and Jim Avery both jumped in as well? And it was a 5-way race with that other guy, David Robertson, who's
David Robertson, who kicked himself $50,000.
He just kicked himself $50,000, and he's a bit more of the grassrootsy type, at least if his Facebook is anything to kind of.
I feel almost bad for him because I seen on his thing he said I'm an Eigel type guy, and I'm like, oh, I think Avery's an Eigel type guy, and I think if Eigel has to pick who's an Eigel type guy, he's gonna pick Jim.
And it's been mentioned to me that Ken does have really good name ID in that area.
He's
so
the best.
How does that shake out? I mean, if
As
there's
Renee.
all 5 of those,
there's a Chevy dealership in like Hillsboro, Reuter Chevrolet, that is. I think we've seen by this Kehoe guy. Those car dealers have name ID.
I think
Yes, I do.
Ken
guys,
pulled me
look
aside,
at
and I
this.
think he said you're getting that wrong. I think that's a different family there that owns that.
But it's Reuter, right? Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, and so
not
let
her,
me give you a
but-
couple things. One is a state rep base. If you looked at the last race and you saw that Mary Elizabeth had a very strong support in her base, each state rep has that base, and so that pretty much sticks with them, and that gives a good advantage to start out. Waller is going to get people who aren't paying attention to the race. It's an expensive market, and Waller's name is known. And so he's going to pick up, a fair number of people who just know the name. Renee was on the county council and a state rep, so I think she's got a base, and she's going to protect that base. David is going to be the same way. Jim's got the biggest problem because he doesn't have a base there. And I'm just telling you, in watching state senate races, when you're a rep, you start out with about 17 to 23% of the vote, no matter what. If you're a strong rep, well established, maybe 26 to 29%. And if you're not, you're 9 or 12%. And people start making bets. It's going to be hard. But I think the answer comes this. I think Jim Avery has the capacity of giving himself money or raising money. I think David Castile is the same. Those are the 2 impact players on money. And so my guess is those 2 are going to determine who wins, either by attacking each other or by attacking someone else. If Avery attacks one of the others who are leading, it probably gives it, to Castile.
Well, if you were advising Kenny, though, Kenny's got support from the laborers. I mean, if you're Kenny, you sit back, right? And if there's 4 or 5 candidates, you're probably definitely in, and you hope your name ID pulls you through, right?
Yeah, but that soft name ID we've seen on these kind of races that you're going to have your schools involved on both sides. You're going to have labor. You're going to have trial bar. You're going to have conservative or freedom caucus. My sense is there's enough money that soft name ID from Kenny's will not be as strong in the end.
I think
and
you're
I'd
right
be
there.
careful of that for him.
I have seen the recent races, the soft name ID doesn't plow through quite like it did in the past. I do think there was a time where that soft name ID meant more than it does today.
Do the ed reformers
so
get in that race?
Avery and Castile are,
Well, I think they
Avery
get in for
Castile-
Castile, right? I mean, if you're the charter school folks, aren't you a Castile person?
yeah. And look, I just think those 2 are going to control the money, and where that money goes, who it attacks or who it doesn't attack, will shape the race. So I think those are the 2 people that will impact the race most.
Jake Rosen, I appreciate the time. I want to thank the good folks at the United Fiber up in the great Northwest and the hotel. Jason, if you're bringing Barry up, right, where are you going to put your own brother in a hotel in Jeff City?
Whatever you tell me to, Scott. How's
The
that?
Courtyard by Marriott. There we go. Courtyard. Appreciate the folks at the Courtyard sponsor of the show. Appreciate David Barklage. Thank you. I know I'm probably in trouble because I took more time than I said I would. I always appreciate the visit, but nobody can have a visit with David Barklage in under an hour. It's not possible.
If he'll
My wife,
call
who
you.
was supposed to go to lunch with me, my wife, who was supposed to go to lunch with me, instead is making a police report. At least I'm going to tell her to. Was that Jason or was that you that made that suggestion
It was Jason.
about her beads?
Jason.
Okay, thank you.
No, that was not me.
Senator, thank you so much. We'll let you get back to work or whatever you
Absolutely.
guys call it these days. And we will see. Jake will be back tomorrow or on Thursday, right?
Yep.
Maybe we get. What if we get 3D Doug in here?
It'll be a fun
I
one.
like that. Maybe 3D Doug will be with Jason, and we will see you Sunday for This Week in Missouri Politics. Thank you.